What if the power over someone's heart doesn't lie in what you do, but in what you consciously choose not to do? Today, you'll uncover one of the most captivating insights into human psychology, a truth Sigmund Freud already understood. The unconscious mind always yearns for what it cannot completely possess. Deep within our psyche lie mechanisms older than our rational mind. Freud knew that genuine attraction doesn't emerge through availability, but through the delicate dance between closeness and distance, between giving and withdrawing. What you'll learn today will forever transform your understanding of interpersonal dynamics. You'll discover why people desire what they cannot have, and how you can harness this ancient psychological truth to develop a magnetic appeal that works even when someone has already entered another relationship. If you're ready to explore the secrets of the human heart, join us on this journey into the soul's deepest chambers. Picture this: a man leaves you for another woman, months pass. Suddenly he calls, sends messages, wants to see you. What happened? Freud would say, the unconscious has spoken. The human psyche operates on a paradoxical principle that Freud called the desire for lack. We don't long for what we have, but for what we're missing. This insight revolutionizes our understanding of attraction and relationships. Think back to your own experiences. When did you miss someone most intensely? Probably not when that person was constantly available, but when they were absent. Freud recognized that our unconscious possesses a fundamental trait. It idealizes the unreachable and devalues the available. This psychological dynamic explains why people often desire what they cannot have. A partner who's always there becomes routine. A partner who's absent becomes longing. The unconscious transforms absence into value, distance into desire. But here's the crucial insight: you can consciously use this dynamic, not through manipulation or games, but through deep understanding of how the human psyche functions. When you understand that desire springs from lack, you can learn to practice strategic absence. This doesn't mean being cold or calculating. It means creating space where the other person's unconscious can work. Freud knew if we're constantly available to someone, we give them no reason to miss us. If, however, we consciously create distance, we activate the deepest longings of the human soul. A practical example: instead of immediately responding to every message, allow space for tension. Instead of being available every evening, nurture your own life. This isn't calculation, it's psychological wisdom. You create the space where longing can emerge. The irony of the human heart is this: the more we withdraw, the more the other's desire follows us. The less we need, the more we're desired. Freud recognized this fundamental truth about human nature. We don't appreciate what we have, but what we fear losing. This insight changes everything. You're no longer the victim of others' unpredictable feelings. You become the conscious architect of attraction by understanding and respecting the deepest laws of the unconscious. What happens in the human psyche when someone we value suddenly isn't there anymore? Freud discovered a fascinating phenomenon. Absence doesn't just strengthen memory, it transforms it. Imagine an everyday situation. You know someone who was always there for you every day. A good morning text every week, shared plans, constant attention. The brain categorizes this person as available and safe. Excitement fades, routine increases. Then something happens. This person withdraws, not dramatically, not hurtfully, simply less present. What occurs in your unconscious? Freud would say, the system of possession claims becomes unstable. The human psyche reacts differently to loss than to possession. While we take possession for granted, the possibility of loss activates our deepest survival mechanisms. Suddenly, the absent person becomes more valuable than ever, not because anything about them changed, but because our perception changed. Freud called this the repetition compulsion of desire. We're programmed to desire what we cannot completely control. A person who's always available. We can control. A person who's absent escapes our control and thereby becomes magnetic. This dynamic explains why people often return to ex-partners, not because fundamental problems were solved, but because absence has idealized memories. Negative aspects fade, positive ones intensify. The unconscious creates an idealized version of the absent person. But here's the key for you. You can consciously employ this power of absence. This doesn't mean disappearing or hurting others. It means strategically creating space for the natural processes of the human unconscious. Practically implemented, instead of being constantly reachable, create moments of unavailability. Have your own interests, your own plans, your own life, not as strategy against someone else, but as expression of your own completeness. Freud recognized people don't desire the needy, but the self-sufficient, not the dependent, but the independent. Paradoxically, we become more attractive the less we need others' validation. This psychological truth also works with someone who's already entered a new relationship, while the new person becomes routine through constant availability. You remain an unsolved puzzle. Through strategic absence, the unconscious constantly works on unsolved puzzles and often neglects the obvious in the process. The deepest irony of human nature is this: we don't appreciate what we have, but what we've lost or could lose. Use this insight not for manipulation, but for liberation, your own and the other person's. Why do we so often define our worth through other people's eyes? Freud discovered one of the most profound truths about the human psyche. We see ourselves through the mirror of others' perception, and this insight holds the key to magnetic attraction. Think back to a moment when you felt particularly attractive or valuable. Probably it wasn't standing alone before a mirror, but seeing admiration in another person's eyes. Freud recognized our self-worth isn't independent. It feeds on the resonance we create in others. This psychological dynamic explains why people often return to someone who once desired them, not because that person became objectively more valuable, but because they remained connected in memory with the feeling of being desirable. Imagine a man left you for another woman. Months later, he encounters people who value you, who speak of you, who highlight your qualities. What happens in his unconscious? The mirror of his own perception begins to waver. Suddenly he sees you, not through the lens of his decision, but through others' eyes, and discovers you anew. Freud called this the mirroring of desire. We don't just desire people directly, we desire them through others' desire for them. A person valued by others automatically becomes more valuable in our perception. Here lies a powerful psychological truth. You cannot increase your attractiveness by humiliating or degrading yourself. You increase it by living a life that inspires and attracts others, not from calculation, but from authentic self-development. Practically, this means invest in yourself, develop your talents, nurture your friendships, pursue your passions, not to make someone jealous, but to become the best version of yourself. People sense the difference between authentic self-development and calculated staging. Freud knew the unconscious responds to energy, not words. A person who values themselves and lives a fulfilling life radiates magnetic energy. This energy works like a mirror. It shows others their own unlived possibilities. The deepest irony is this: the less you need someone else, the more they need you, not from spite or calculation, but from a fundamental psychological law. People are drawn to what they themselves want to become. When you lead a fulfilled, self-determined life, you become a mirror for others' unlived dreams. You show them what's possible, and that makes you irresistibly attractive, even to someone who once left you. This insight frees you from the victim role. You're no longer dependent on others' decisions. You become the creator of your own attractiveness by living a life that inspires and attracts others. What happens when a person transfers their deepest unfulfilled longings onto another person? Freud discovered one of the most fascinating mechanisms of the human psyche: projection, and this insight explains why people often return to someone they once left behind. Imagine a man leaves you for a new relationship. Initially, he projects all his hopes, his dreams of perfect love onto this new person. She becomes the canvas for his unsatisfied desires. But what happens when reality cannot fulfill this projection? Freud recognized no real person can permanently carry the burden of our unfulfilled dreams. The new partner isn't the idealized fantasy, she's a human being, with her own needs, weaknesses, everyday problems. The projection begins to crumble. Here lies the crucial psychological moment, when projection on the new person fades. The unconscious seeks new projection surfaces, and who presents themselves the person from the past who through absence has become mysterious again. This dynamic explains why ex-partners often have idealized character, not because the past relationship was perfect, but because absence strengthens projection. The unconscious creates an idealized version of the absent person, free from the everyday conflicts of the present. Freud knew people don't fall in love with real persons, but with their projections onto these persons, and projections work best with people who have enough distance to serve as canvas. But here lies your power. You can consciously become a person who attracts positive projections, not through manipulation, but through authentic self-development. When you lead a fulfilled, mysterious life, you become the ideal projection surface for others' unfulfilled longings. Practically, this means don't share every aspect of your life. Maintain certain privacy, certain depth that others can only sense. People don't project their dreams onto open books, but onto fascinating mysteries. Simultaneously, continue developing yourself. Learn new skills, discover new sides of yourself, grow beyond yourself. When someone encounters you after months or years, they should discover a person who has become richer, deeper, more fascinating. Freud recognized a paradoxical truth. The more we realize ourselves, the more we become projection surfaces for others' unrealized dreams. A person living their potential shows others what would be possible in them. This psychological dynamic works especially strongly with people who once knew us. They have a reference, a comparison point. When you've developed further, they project their own unlived possibilities onto your transformation. The deepest insight is this: you cannot control how others see you, but you can influence who you are, and the more authentic, mysterious, and developed you become, the more magnetic you become for others' projections, including those who once left you. What happens to feelings we try to suppress? Freud discovered one of the most powerful laws of the human psyche: the repressed always returns. And with double intensity, this insight explains why people often return to someone they once tried to forget. Think of your own experiences. Have you ever tried not to think about something? The more you strain to suppress a thought, the more persistently it returns. Freud recognized the unconscious doesn't function through negation. It cannot not think, it can only repress, and everything repressed accumulates psychic energy. This dynamic works especially strongly with emotional bonds. A man leaves you convinced he'll forget you. He plunges into a new relationship, invests all his energy in this fresh start. But what happens to the repressed feelings for you? Freud knew repressed emotions don't disappear. They go underground and gather strength there, like water pooling behind a dam. They build pressure and eventually the dam breaks. This break often happens in unexpected moments. A song, a scent, a random memory, and suddenly all repressed feelings break through the barriers of consciousness with an intensity that surprises the person themselves. Here lies a deep psychological truth. The more someone tries to forget you, the stronger the unconscious bond to you becomes. The unconscious interprets repression as importance. Only significant things need to be repressed. But you can use this dynamic to your advantage, not through manipulation, but through understanding. When you know that repressed feelings return with amplified force, you can be patient. You don't have to fight or pressure. The psyche works for you. Practically, this means accept the other's decision with dignity, show neither desperation nor anger. This emotional maturity paradoxically strengthens repression in the other because it shows you're valuable enough to be treated with respect. Simultaneously continue living your life, not to make someone jealous, but to be authentic. This authenticity works like a psychological magnet. It shows the other what they've repressed. Freud recognized people don't return to what they possessed, but to what they couldn't completely possess. When you let go with dignity, you paradoxically become unpossessable and therefore more desirable. The other's new relationship becomes distraction from repressed feelings, but distractions don't work permanently. Eventually, the unconscious confronts the person with what they sought to avoid. This return of the repressed often happens in moments of emotional vulnerability, stress, disappointment, loneliness. They all weaken psychic barriers, and then the heart remembers what it tried to forget. The deepest irony of the human psyche is this: we can only forget what's unimportant. Everything important returns, and through repression becomes even more important: trust. This psychological truth, it works in your unconscious, even when you cannot consciously control it. What happens when a person suddenly understands why they act as they do? Freud believed in the transformative power of insight. Where it was there, ego shall be this deepest of all psychological truths, holds the key not only to understanding, but to true liberation, both for you and for the person you wish to win back. Imagine a man has left. You entered a new relationship, tried to forget you, but the psychological forces we've discussed work in his unconscious. The paradox of longing, the power of absence, the projection of unfulfilled desires, the return of the repressed, they all work together, creating inner tension that seeks resolution. Freud recognized the unconscious only becomes conscious force when we understand and integrate it. And here lies your true power. You can become the conscious person who enables this integration. This doesn't mean playing psychological games or manipulating it, means the opposite: complete authenticity and clarity about your own motives and desires. When you understand the psychological dynamics at work in interpersonal relationships, you can act with a clarity and calm that works magnetically. A person who understands themselves, who has recognized and integrated their own unconscious patterns, radiates a special quality. Freud called it psychological health, the ability to love and work authentically without being driven by unconscious compulsions. This quality works like a catalyst for others' unconscious processes. When someone encounters you who is internally free, it reflects their own unconscious prisons. The other's clarity becomes a mirror of one's own confusion. Practically, this means develop into a person who no longer needs what they once needed, not from indifference, but from inner completeness. This transformation is paradoxically the most attractive thing you can radiate. Freud knew people aren't drawn to neediness, but to abundance, not to weakness, but to strength, not to what's missing, but to what's present. When you've fully developed yourself, you become the source of what others seek. This inner development also changes your radiance. You become someone who can give rather than take, who can understand rather than be understood, who can love without expecting reciprocation. These qualities are so rare in human nature that they work magnetically. When the man who once left you encounters this developed version of yourself, something fascinating happens. He unconsciously recognizes what he gave up, not the person you were, but the person you've become. And this recognition can be transformative. But the deepest truth is this: you shouldn't undergo this development for someone else's sake, but for your own. The true liberation doesn't lie in winning someone back, but in becoming a person who rests completely in themselves. Freud believed when we make our unconscious conscious, we become free from the compulsions of the past, free from others' projections, free from fear of loss. This freedom is the most attractive quality a person can radiate. It makes you irresistible not only to the one you wish to win back, but to everyone who encounters you. What you've discovered today is more than a strategy. It's a journey to the deepest truth about human nature. Freud showed us that love and desire don't follow logic's laws, but the unconscious's laws. the paradox of longing, the power of absence, the force of projection, the return of the repressed, they all work in the human soul's depths. But the greatest insight is this: true attraction doesn't emerge through strategies, but through authentic self-development. When you become a person who is internally free, complete, and understanding, you become magnetic, not only to one person, but to everyone who encounters you. What hidden truth about yourself could transform your life if you had the courage to recognize and live it? Drop a comment letting us know what country you're watching from. We're fascinated by the depth and wisdom of our global community. If this journey into the mysteries of human psychology touched you, hit that like button and subscribe. For more insights into the heart's mysteries, your thoughts and experiences in the comments enrich us all, because in the human soul's depths, we're all connected.